Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Thank you guys for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us so quick. Thank you.
So, yeah, lots going on. And obviously, with the coronavirus, it's still rampant. Numbers are curious, to say the least. Lots of things going on. Good to see you guys in the chat room.
Hi, Quantum Motor, Bob Jones. Hi, Crystal Core, Half-Breed Guitars, Raven, Escape Matrix, Enterprise. Love it.
So, lots to talk about here. One of the first things that I wanted to bring up, and so we see this is the official website of the Department of Homeland Security. Ready with a check. Pandemic. So it's got an update on what to do before a pandemic. So obviously they're taking it seriously now. We've said that the WHO seemed to move extremely slow. And, when we look at all the figures and stuff, and we know that figures are not correct, they're still ominous when we look at the increases in the cases. And let's jump over here real quick. These circles are getting big. And now you got 3 big circles in a triangle. And 31,377 confirmed cases. They're saying 638 deaths, and they're saying 1,541 totally recovered. And when we look at it, you have 31,111 in mainland China, 45 in Japan, 28 Singapore, 25 Thailand, 24 Hong Kong, 23 South Korea, 16 Taiwan, 15 Australia, 12 in Germany, 12 in US, 12 in Malaysia, 10 in Vietnam, 10 in Macau, 6 in France, 5 in Canada. Gotta wonder about that Canadian number too, because I've heard rumors about Vancouver and British Columbia. 5 in the UAE, 3 in India, in that everybody is talking about it's going to rapidly change. 2 in Italy, 2 in Russia, and 2 in the Philippines.
Yeah, so, the numbers are still going up, not down, and that's why we're taking it so seriously. And it spreads so easy. There's been case after case after case where people didn't have very much contact and they ended up getting it. So, I saw some things today that are swaying me to look at these videos that we've been watching come out of Wuhan, to look at them and take them more seriously, with a serious frame of mind, not thinking that they're made up or fake.
Yeah, it's what we're seeing and what we're hearing said are two different things. One of the things that came out now, and this is another research paper, and they're looking at the RO. And so they're estimating here it's between 3.6 and 4.0. That's huge. That is huge. Again, Spanish flu was 1.8, and Spanish flu killed somewhere between 50 and 100 million people back at a time when the population of the world was much less than now, and where the amount of people that were traveling via the air and trains and everything were much, much less. So chances are, this can really definitely outdo the Spanish flu if what we're seeing is correct. Because, again, the numbers, they don't mesh with what people are showing us. And I'm sure you guys, have been experiencing the same thing. And T. Fanjoy, much love, light, and peace, most definitely. Nuclear quantum lasers learned a new quote today. It's war is not about who's right; it's about who's left. Yeah, well, and this is a war on in a medical sense, and it may very well be a war against humanity when you get down to it.
It is, and like I have been saying before, these guys are looking out for their best interests. And The only use we are to them really is their batteries to keep their businesses going and so on and so forth. So that means I think we need to be a little more vicious and ruthless when it comes to taking back our own health and our own power from these guys. Because like I said, they want batteries. They want people to run their world.
And here we see how the LA Times, second child under coronavirus quarantine and in Riverside is hospitalized. And so this is a second child who was taken to Riverside University Health System Medical Center after developing fever Wednesday while under quarantine at March Air Reserve Base, authorities said. Child was tested for the new coronavirus, is awaiting results. On Monday, a child was taken to the medical center after developing a fever. That child, a 10-month-old boy, according to documents obtained by Newsweek, was returned to the base Wednesday by a government vehicle after testing negative for the virus. So, there's a lot of people now that are coming back into the U.S. And are going into quarantine. And as we were saying about this, if it truly is between a 3.6 and a 4.0, this is going to spread so fast. It's just going to give you whiplash. It's just not a good situation at all. Here we see how Zero Hedge, the virus cases explode on quarantine cruise ship. In Japan, as China claims number of sick is shrinking. Do we believe that? So total cases stand at 31,439, death toll 639. China claims the growth in people under medical observation has peaked and is now slowing. We hope so. That would be wonderful to dodge this. I don't even think you should call it a bullet. It's more like a nuclear missile. If we could dodge this, that would be wonderful. But do you guys really think that's the case? Do you really think that's the case?
I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the case is exactly. I don't think any of us do. There's still a whole lot of questions. There's a whole lot of things going on. There's new things that come up all the time. I'm still leaning toward maybe the 5G weakened these people's energy fields and made them really, really susceptible. And someone made a comment about maybe, like we showed a video of a guy at the computer the other day, and that he just kind of fell down into a convulsion and seizures, and maybe they zapped him with some 5G. So I'm thinking about that still.
And so just looking at some of these other headlines here, Japan reports 41 additional cases, so 61 aboard the cruise ship. Senior CCP official orders Wuhan to round up infected residents for mass quarantine camps. Beijing completes second coronavirus hospital in Wuhan. Wuhan hospital confirms doctor that was one of the first to warn about it died on Thursday. Economists warn China faces difficult dilemma in deciding when workers should go back to work. Taiwan halts visas for citizens of Macau and Hong Kong. Germany confirms 13th case, 2 suspected cases found in South Africa. And Dubai reports third death outside of China. And looking at the nationalities of the 61 people on the cruise ship, you had 28 Japanese, 11 American. So, we're showing 12. And here they're saying 11. So obviously that number can't be added. You have to add that too, because this is saying there's 11 Americans that have the coronavirus. And so I guess they're not counting them in the total. And the same thing with the Japanese as well. So, the totals are way off, as we know. 7 Australian, 7 Canadian, 3 Chinese, 1 each from New Zealand, Taiwan, Philippines, Argentina, and the UK. So we were talking, too, about this being, is this something that's a bioweapon? Is it something that's race-specific? And, you would have to look at these numbers and say, maybe it's not race-specific, although we don't know, again, the survival rates of people that come down with it. Here you see the police are actually checking cell phones to see if people are spreading stuff, and then they're arresting them. So anybody that's saying what's going on in China is getting arrested. That's very disconcerting to say the least. And we're seeing more and more people trying to cope with, being pent up. And they have different ways of doing it.
I don't know. We could do something like that too and put it on the. Well, at least we have internet and we could make a show like that. I think you'd look cute.
Oh, she's my greatest fan there. But I don't know. I just can't see myself doing this. But you never know. I mean, after a while, when you start getting pent up, you got to just express it. And here you see 30,000 geese have died because the shutdown of the country made it impossible for the farmers to feed the birds. China gets ready to starve. That's a big statement, and that's very, very on point, unfortunately, everything we're seeing. And here you see a guy trying to outrun the police and doing a pretty good job of it as he just zooms by them all. Pretty wild what we're seeing here. Well, those cops, I think, needed some driving lessons. Not too effective. And this is Dr. Eric Fegelding. 3,100 new cases. That's 2 consecutive days. It's slower than previous day case reports. Still hard to tell if it's a real slowdown or an artifact of overwhelmed testing backlog. What I want to know is how many new secondary community cases are occurring outside of mainland China. So that is true. And that's the thing. We don't see the real numbers. At least 3 people on the same plane as the first pneumonia-infected person in the Philippines showed symptoms of infection as well. And again, with that RO of 3.0 to 4.0, that's serious. And I personally, we are hunkered down. We are hunkered down. We're not like going out in public. We don't go out too much anyway. I was so tempted to go out tonight because I'm getting a little stir crazy. And to go to our place where we shoot pool. We haven't shot pool in 2 weeks, which is always just like a nice break for us. But decided against it. I think at this point it's prudent, and this is just me. It's prudent to limit our exposure to other people at this point. Even here in the U.S., we might have some time here in the U.S. before what we're seeing over in China comes, if it does come, because we don't know for sure either. We hope not. But still, I think it's prudent to limit your exposure to other people right now, especially if you're in bigger cities. If you're in New York and LA and any of the bigger cities, Chicago, I would definitely be worrying more about infection and trying to limit exposure. And so here you see Amy Kin saying that we have been told our Wuhan hotel is being requisitioned by the government to hold suspected coronavirus patients. Seems the government is realizing the strategy of self-quarantine at home is a huge problem, leading to more, often cross-generational infections as well. And this is the doctor that we had talked about that had kind of leaked info about what's going on, and he did pass away due to the virus, sadly there. And then there's reports that Shenzhen is now on lockdown. Some people say no, it's not, but others are saying yes, it's on lockdown. Anyway, you look at it, you have close to 100 million people that are on lockdown right now. And this is one gentleman, Myriad Misadventures, who just is traveling around the world and looking at neat stuff. And he's in China. And he's reporting that now they're not just taking your temperature to get into my complex. They're writing it down alongside with your name, ID number, apartment number, phone number, and the time you arrived. They are taking this very seriously. And here we see Pentagon to provide military installations near 11 major airports for coronavirus quarantine. And this is about people coming back to the U.S. from abroad, which there are still people coming back in from abroad. And one of them still is David Dubine, who I have not heard from. I left him a message this morning, and I have not heard from him yet, just to let you guys know.
So there's a whole lot of new things going on. And like we're looking at these folks now. So this is like a normal way of life in China. and Michael just got a call. So, I mean, oh my God, I'm stuck with you guys here alone. Um, this always makes me nervous, but I think I'm okay. I feel like I'm in good hands with you guys. Um, so yeah, say hi, Patricia. Hi, Brian. Hi, Becca Morrison. This virus is targeted at Asians. Asians have 50% more. Yeah, but it will affect every one of us. Every one of us that have Native American, India. Yeah, it might. It might. It very well could. I was thinking about that too. Aw, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. You could. Aw, thank you, Crystal Core. You guys are so nice. But I was looking at these folks here, and this is this is like their normal way of life. This is just how things are going to be, and it's probably going to be here too. You know. Oh, cool. We have Raven. Wonderful.
Yeah, we have with us Raven, who you guys probably know from the chat room, and Raven's a good friend, Western North Carolina, and he's got a lot of knowledge on this and a lot of other stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So, Raven, you're on the air.
Hey, everybody. So, what do we want to talk about, Michael?
Well, I know you've been talking to Dr. Paul Cottrell
Yes.
a lot and helping him out. So, just give us an update on what you talked to him about and what you're seeing out there. What do you think the real numbers are, and what are we really facing?
Well, I told you earlier that I had went back and gotten the January 18th numbers from the state-by-state reporting and from the CDC, and they were in agreement. Now, on January 18th, they said we had 19 million people who had been infected by flu. Now, that's not necessarily the Wuhan flu, but that's flu. And then we had 310,000 had been hospitalized, and we had 25,000 that were deceased. Now, old people get the flu and the pneumonia will take them. So, I mean, these are normal things. But when the CDC released their numbers on January 31st, they revised them down quite a bit. We've got 15 million who have been infected. We've got 140,000 that have been hospitalized. And we've got 10,000 that are dead. What people need to understand is CDC gets reports every week from every state health department. And I went state by state and did the counts myself and checked them against the CDC numbers that they had for the 18th. I cannot fathom that they made that large of a marginal error in their counting and reporting. So that's the first thing that I want to get off the table right off the bat is there is obviously an error somewhere, and it seems like they're underreporting on purpose.
Yeah, I would not be surprised about that at all. And it's the same thing China's doing, underreporting on purpose, and just don't want to cause panic. But what it does is it could create a false sense of security.
See, that's the issue that you get into when you have something like this going around. Is you don't want to cause panic, you don't want to cause chaos, but at the same time, if you're giving out adequate information, then you have this lackadaisical attitude that people get. I was told the other day that it's not here in the United States. Physically, that's impossible. They've been running 8,000 flights out of China in the area since November when this thing was first discovered. There is no possible way that this hasn't touched almost every part of the world already.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. That's why, as I was just saying, I think it's good for people to, limit your exposure. Most definitely limit your exposure. Just err on the side of caution.
Well, anytime that they have I would, shame on me for saying this, but I said the Super Bowl was our Wuhan banquet. We had all these people around the country gathered at parties. We had the Super Bowl itself with all the festivities that go along with that, plus the parade. And they did all of this knowing that this thing is in the United States and is loose. It's not contained. There's no way. That was just plain foolishness. Do they not want to cause a panic? Do they want to keep things normal? I understand that. But protocol was always, you set up a quarantine, and these people that are being held for 14 days, that's not even the length of the duration of the cycle for this particular virus. It's 21 days plus 8 to make sure that they're clear. So they would have to be quarantined for the protocol, which is 30 days. And I don't understand why this is not being done either.
Right. And I just saw a comment that I haven't seen anything about this, but somebody in the chat room says 3 people in Georgia died of flu symptoms and hemorrhaging, students in one high school and a man. At first, the person thought it was Ebola, and the CDC took the bodies. I haven't heard of that. I'm not sure if you had either, but I remember the guy in Kentucky, that had a hemorrhagic fever that was in isolation. I don't know if he recovered or not. I haven't seen anything about that either.
Well, this virus, I don't know what people know about this virus, but what we can for sure say is that this thing is manufactured. The reason why is because it shows proteins from SARS, from MERS. Most people have heard of those 2 things. It also shows HIV proteins, which is in exactly the right spot to inhibit your immune system. This is not something that would have been, created by batch seeding in a laboratory setting. This is something that was manufactured, and based upon the specifics of this and the way that it's working, it's not a large leap to say that this is CRISPR technology at work. There's no way to physically, by human hand or by the automated systems, to put this thing together that way.
Mm-hmm. So a question that I've been having, Raven, is when people call this the coronavirus, I mean, isn't that like a blanket statement for a cold or a flu?
Well, what I have been telling folks around here is coronavirus is like saying frog.
Right.
When I say coronavirus 2019 novel, I'm speaking very specifically about this species, for lack of a better term, of virus that has broken out in Wuhan. It's just like, saying frog or saying Amazon tree frog. There's a lot of different ones of those too. But coronavirus is a flu virus. They've been around for a long, long, long time. Another thing that people are under the misunderstanding with is that coronavirus is not a human virus. All the coronaviruses came either through avians, birds, or pigs. They jumped to humanity, and we have learned to live with them, but these are not human viruses. So anybody who says that they're not working with a human coronavirus is not lying, but they're not telling the truth either. Just like the media saying that we're having a very severe flu season doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying, but they're not telling you what kind of flu that we're dealing with.
So that's what I was worried about, like using our vocabulary words and hearing the vocabulary words, because to me, ultimately, this feels like it's a power grab. I mean, it feels very, very real. But the way they talk about it, just saying, oh, there's so many cases of coronavirus, that could mean anything. And I feel so much deceit around this whole situation.
Well, half truth is still lying, but it's also telling half the truth. And that's the thing that people need to understand. We've had just absolutely normal corona, what they call flu type A and flu type B in this area. But we've also had people who have had extreme onset symptoms where their lungs fill up, their kidneys fail, and they end up with a septic infection. And that is the symptom chain of events for this Wuhan strain of coronavirus.
Wow.
Yeah, I have up an article on CRISPR gene editing, because that's basically what we're talking about. Is it could be something that was, put together using this type of technology.
Absolutely. See, here's the thing. Manually, you can do a lot of manipulation, and using batch settings where you repeatedly grow these viruses, you can actually engineer them to a point where you can get certain traits that you want. The problem is this thing's proteins were spliced in a way that was very, very, very specific, and it points to CRISPR technology. I've talked to several people about this, and honestly, we don't see any other way that this thing could have been created.
One thing before I forget this question in my head, Raven. Now, is Lysol and bleach, are those things that can kill this thing? Does that still apply with this thing?
Well, the hospital setting is the 10% mixture, which is 3/4 of a cup of bleach to 1 gallon of water. You have to leave it on and let it dry. When you're talking about Lysol and spray disinfectants, each one of them has a different time setting. So you have to make sure you read the label and make sure that you allow the time setting. Like the ones that I use say 10 minutes. So you want to, if you're not doing what the directions tell you, you're not disinfecting anything. Really good example, since we're on this subject, we'll go through prevention. Hand washing, everybody knows this, but it is 2 minutes up to your elbow, and make sure you get under your fingernails. In flu season, you should keep your fingernails short, and I know that upsets some ladies, but it's better because you can actually carry this under your fingernails. You want to make sure you leave your shoes outside, or at least make sure that they're disinfected top and bottom, because you'll pick it up on the bottom of your shoes before you go in. Right now, I am actually disinfecting the stuff that I'm bringing home from the store. Cardboard containers like half gallons of milk and orange juice will actually hold this virus. And while we're thinking about it, it's just normal flu. Let's not even think about Wuhan. If you don't want to bring it into your house, you need to make sure you do preventative measures anyway.
Yeah, and don't bring it into your house.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that information. I just didn't know, since this thing is all spliced up and changed, if we know for sure that these things will work on disinfecting and killing it.
Well, I can break down the splicing. SARS, I'm sorry, I'm putting the two of them together. SARS and MERS had a very high transfer rate. Both of them actually kind of put themselves out of business because they acted so quickly. This one here's not doing that. But they have a very high transfer rate. And then you add the HIV proteins, and that seems to be in just the right spot that it is causing an lack of response. It's actually subduing your immune system so that this thing can get a hold of you. On the front end of it, we haven't matched this 100%, but it looks pattern-wise like they've used a variety of Spanish flu. I haven't been able to match the protein 100%, but I'm doing this by hand and by eye, using patterns, not using the computer. I'm very good at it, but, there is room for error because I'm, exhausted at this point. I've had, 2 hours of sleep every night, 2-3 hours of sleep every night since I've started working on this. But anyway, that's the other thing about the Spanish flu is it had a latency period, just like MERS, so that you would be carrying it and it would be developing inside of you, but you would not show any symptoms until, the rapid onset hit. That's what made the second round of the Spanish flu so devastating versus the first time it went around.
Right. As far as immunity goes, what's the best thing to keep, super high in our system? I know people have talked about colloidal silver. I've talked about it. Is there anything that's we can keep in our system that's a huge preventative besides copious amounts of vitamin C? Because that's what I'm doing now.
Well, the first thing that people need to understand is if you're taking vitamin C, like one of them 2,000 or 3,000 milligram vitamin C's, you're just urinating most of it out. What you want to do is drop down to 200, 250, and take it 3 or 4 times a day. That way it stays current in your body. The other thing that you need to have to be careful of is, I hope I say this right, it's cytoids or cytoroids. My pronunciation on this one is terrible, but you have to be careful with elderberry, because if you get this and you're taking elderberry, it can actually help this thing develop inside your lungs more quickly.
Really? Wow. Because we've gotten a lot of information thrown around in the chat saying elderberry. So that's why I like to...
Elderberry is very good for your immune system, but if you already have this flu or symptoms of it, you need to quit taking it right away. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. I want to clear that up really quick. But elderberry is known to do this for flu, okay? It's normal flu.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that information there. That's good.
It's very good for keeping your system boosted, but you got to be careful, because if you're already showing symptoms of flu, you do not want to take this. You could get pneumonia.
Wow. Okay. Good to know.
It could actually make the pneumonia worse. Back to the numbers that Michael asked me about. Do you have any more questions?
Just on super quick, colloidal silver, if I were to spray that on surfaces, will that kill it if it dries?
That has always been an accepted thing. I do not honestly know. I know colloidal silver will help with sepsis in your bloodstream. I know it will help keep your immune system boosted, and it kills a lot of gut things that you don't want. I do not know how it acts on a surface, so I'd rather be honest than tell you something I don't know.
Thank you. I'll give you back to Michael. Thank you for all that info.
Thank you, brother, for sharing that. And as we have been talking about, I know you've been talking to Dr. Paul as well, and he's still putting out 3 or 4 videos a day, so he's definitely doing his research. And I know he was thinking that this was probably a biological warfare weapon, perhaps targeted against China. It's interesting that so much evidence is there that makes you think China maybe released it, or they did a whoopsie, for lack of a better word. But, I got to wonder, or is this like a beautiful covert first strike? Because, what do you think?
There's a lot of rumors going around like the virus was stolen from Canada and that it came from different institutions and different researchers and this and that and the other. And the truth is that it would have had to been Dr. Frankenstein of microbiologists and a CRISPR. So that limits where this thing could have come from. Now, fact is that China has had serious problems with both MERS and SARS variants, coronavirus variants coming from the chickens, and I think you showed a video of them, burying all those chicks. And we know that they just had the swine flu outbreak again. They have been working very, very hard in multiple facilities over there to figure out a virus vaccine for these coronaviruses that keep breaking out over there. Part of the problem is they have pork and chicken and people all in one place. That's what started the Spanish flu.
Right. Yeah, actually, when you look at the new hospitals they put up, it looks just like the Spanish flu. I mean, the beds are like right on top of each other, and it just looks more like a place to go die instead of heal,
Well, and that's unfortunate. Now, I don't know how many people have seen, but are now converting arenas over to the tune of about 150,000 patients. And that's just the ones that I've been able to get counts on. They are now trying to get gymnasiums and all kinds of other things in order to put quarantine centers in, which kind of brings us back around to those numbers you were asking me about. First thing I want to say is normalcy bias is a really, really hard thing to deal with. You want everything to stay the same, and you don't want to see things terribly wrong happen. The other thing is cognitive dissonance. You're seeing one thing and you're hearing another, and that creates huge, huge holes in your brain. I've been dealing with this because I've been working on this thing until 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning almost every night. So the Wuhan numbers, if you take the original numbers that they gave and you take the projections of data that came from the laboratories on this particular strain that originally were released, what you're looking at is it's horrible, because right now there should be about 99 million people carrying that infection. Now, will they die from it? Not necessarily. If it mutates, it could be a lot lighter effects, a lot lighter symptoms. If it mutates the other way, it could kill more. But if it kills them more quickly, it'll put itself out, just like SARS did. So we're looking at about 99 million people infected. We're looking at somewhere around 500,000 dead. And if you take the 5% that are being tested, those numbers match. Those numbers match, because we've gotten reports that only 5% out of 100 are being tested, while 83 people out of 100 are showing symptoms when they show up at the hospital. That is really, really awful.
Yeah, it's pretty ominous. And with what we're seeing happening over there in countless videos, to think of there being 31,000, confirmed cases with only 638 deaths, the response wouldn't be that way, because like we were saying, the regular flu is worse.
Well, let me point. Can I point out what that chart is that's coming out with the deaths? You know, I think it's the infected are like 20,000 now, and the number of deaths is like up to 500. You know which chart I'm talking about, the information they keep bringing out.
Yeah, it's 31,472 confirmed, 638 deaths.
Well, now that chart itself is what they call a quadratic projection. Basically, what they've done is they've taken 2.1%, and anybody can figure this out. It's 2.1 or 2.3%, depending on which day you're looking at, and they projected it out, and those are the numbers that they're releasing. The problem with quadratic projections is that doesn't work with viruses, because viruses are exponential infections. 1 gets it, 2 gets it, 4 gets it, 8 gets it, 16 get it. I hope that kind of gives it a display. In this case, we're thinking that the RO value is between 4 and 6. So 1 person gets it, 4 gets it, 16 gets it, 32 gets it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so many of the studies coming out, like one came out today, said between 3.6 and 4. So, you know, it's pretty severe. Yeah, Spanish flu was 1.8. So it's definitely moving at a very fast rate.
Well, and the other reason why me and my sources are saying that the numbers are that high is, and again, I hate to even be going this route, but the other reason why we think the numbers are that high is because of the crematorium that are running in Wuhan. Originally, they were running 4 hours a day at night to lower the pollution standard that they were putting up. They used to run 4 hours a night, and they would by their own standards, would be able to cremate 300 bodies in 4 hours. Those facilities have been running 24 hours a day for the last 28 days.
Yeah, we've seen the smoke in pictures as well. So, yeah, if you have 100 million people, and China's got like 1.6 billion, 1.5 billion, then you're talking a significant amount of the population that's already infected.
Well, they didn't put the quarantine in place in time. And, the way their system works, everybody has to wait for the next hired person in order to keep from getting their head cut off. And I do understand the fear that they have, but their inherent dishonesty with their own people is bad enough. But the problem that you have is we've had those 7 crematorium in Wuhan running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 28 days now. And they've activated more of them that you can see in the satellite. And they've been running 24/7 for the last week. When you start putting those numbers together, you're going to see that our death counts are pretty spot on.
Yeah, so what will we be facing over here in, say, a month's time? What do you think?
Well, we have an advantage in the United States that we have a more hygienic population, and we have more spread as far as being rural. In Wuhan, they had 23 million people, mostly worker class, that go into the city and work and then go home on the holidays to be with the rest of their family. When you have that kind of a population density, of course your RO factor is going to go up, and your transfer rates is going to go way, way up. What I was telling you the other night, the way this thing works is every time you come in contact with somebody, you've got 16.6% chance of getting it. When you reach number 6, the odds of you not having it are against you. So you think about a population density like Wuhan or China in general, plus all the traveling. You think they said that 5 to 8 million people left Wuhan before the quarantine went in. The odds of, say, 75 or 80% of them not carrying it out with them are very, very low.
Do we know anything about pets dying from this?
Well, it is a flu, which means that some animals could get it. I mean, actually, internalize it. But the other problem that you have is coronavirus sets. Under some circumstances, it can set alive for 28 days. Right now, John Campbell over in the UK is saying that somewhere between 4 and 6 days, and that is, the average. But some of these things with the hardened protein shell can survive for up to 21 to 28 days in the right environments. So if somebody sneezes and then pets a dog, I can't imagine that the dog couldn't be carrying it on its fur.
Right. Yeah, and they are culling so many animals. And then we had the swine flu as well, which wiped out at least 25% of the world's pig population, which is enormous. So it's just been one thing on top of the other. It's just a horrible situation that we're seeing unfold.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people want me to get into the political and the social aspects of this, but, I told you before that if I was an evil psychopath who wanted to consolidate power and maybe shift power in China, they could not have picked a better time, the 1st of November, the end of October, or the most potent virus to turn loose when they did it. With the travel from China, it was going to go global very, very quickly. That 201 that they had run, the simulation started in Brazil. Brazil is not the huge travel hub, nor the business and industrial hub that China is. So obviously the effects coming out of Brazil could have been offset quite a bit more. And Brazil doesn't have the population that China does either.
Right. Yeah, it's like a perfect storm that we're seeing, and the timing, like you said, is very, very suspect. It's
suspect. Absolutely. If I was going to do this intentionally, I would have picked a virus like this, and I would have put it. I might have chosen a different region, but Wuhan's perfect because it's the crossroads of China.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think the 5G could actually have with making people sicker than they might have been if they had not been exposed to the 5G?
Well, the truth is 5G could cause mutations in the virus. We know this. 5G, 5G is also known to affect human anatomy. It could lower your immune system. I mean, Mike Steele talks about that. Anything that you're getting as far as electronic interference, radio frequency radiation, cell phones, any of that, we know it has an effect on our cellular structure. So, any exposure to a significant amount of even cell phone towers, just normal cell phone towers, is going to lower your resistance.
Right. That's what I was afraid of too. And, isn't Wuhan where the 5G rolled out, kind of?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are wanting to instantly equate 5G to this virus, but they're two separate issues. Now, one could exacerbate the other.
Yeah.
But these are two completely separate issues. And, I know in the conspiracy realm, there are a lot of things that have been proven out to be true over the years, but you don't want to start mixing things that are unrelated just because they happen to be coincidental.
Got it.
In time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, the timing on everything and exactly where this is. Like you said, I mean, Wuhan is kind of central. It's in a spot that would spread from the, center point outwards. And that's
anybody moving east to west in China or north to south in China tends to go through that Wuhan train station or, other transportation. But we also have a huge international group that has businesses there. Good example is Hyundai right now had to close their factories down because they're not getting parts.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the economic impact's going to be just monumental. But if we have 100 million infected right now in reality, are we looking at 1 billion infected? Are we looking at something that's going to end up being 25% of the entire global population getting infected?
Well, how it's going to operate is going to depend on population density, hygiene, medical care available. And, as more and more people get sick, your medical availability drops. If this thing gets loose in India, it's not going to be pleasant. If this thing gets loose in Taiwan, the Philippines, some parts of Africa, this is not going to be pleasant. A place like Munich, Germany, for example, or New York City, I hate to point that out to you folks that are from up that way. That kind of population density with high public transportation use and constant interaction between people is going to increase the risk of infection.
Yeah.
And if you want global numbers, well, let's just take Wuhan in China, for example. This thing spread out when those people left Wuhan for the holiday. If it holds to the pattern that it originally started out being presented with, we could be looking at a doubling of numbers every 6 days.
Is that for now? What are your thoughts on how it's going to look like in the United States? Is it just everything you stated? Do you think once it gets here, you think it's going to settle down? Because my intuition tells me it's going to lose a little bit of steam, but maybe not enough.
Well, you know, these viruses mutate as they travel. One of the big disinformation campaigns out there right now is it affects Asian males more than females and non-ethnic Asians. Mm-hmm. This virus got loose in a high male population, about 70% male in Wuhan. Average age actually was under 50. So this virus would have adapted to what it had available. Well, that's what it had available. As it spreads out, it will adapt. We have seen that males have been taking a much harder hit from this thing, but that's related to the, hopefully I pronounce this right, H2A factor. It comes from the generation of testosterone from the testicles, actually. And it seems that there is something that is allowing this to act more severely in males.
One other thing I've been seeing that's flying around that concerns me is people saying if you've smoked cigarettes or if you smoke cigarettes or cannabis, you are immune.
Well, if your lungs are already compromised, I say as I blow the smoke out from my cigarette. I hope everybody in the chat room got a kick out of that.
I did.
If your lungs are already compromised from smoking or from having pneumonia before or having a severe case of the flu or, you know, chemical exposure in a factory, if your lungs are already compromised, then yes, you are, and John Campbell covered this in one of his videos, you are going to be one of the higher percentage people that's going to suffer from this if you end up getting it.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
There are other factors. Surprisingly, diabetes and a few things like that don't seem to be as prevalent as having smoked, having had a former condition. And this is coming from John Campbell over in the UK, and he's a source that I absolutely trust. In case y'all didn't notice, I've got him listed in my coronavirus playlist on YouTube.
That's awesome. I'll have to look at that. We haven't had time to dig into what you've been doing, but you're such a wealth of information, and we so appreciate you coming on. So, you know, I was just...
I'm probably stressing you out, too, with all the information I'm sending your way.
No, I love it, because you're actually, you know, hammering home a lot of questions that were just sort of loose ends for me out there.
Well, and you know, you asked me about the infection rate here in the United States. Mm-hmm. The truth is it's already loose, and we already have an increased number of severe flu cases. The fact that the CDC decided to revise its numbers down by such a high margin tells me that there's, you know, something to this. Mm-hmm. With treatment, it seems like people are recovering fairly well, but it's taking 2 to 3 weeks hospital stays. Now, that is going to really tax the system. We had one person who had been in the hospital for 3.5 weeks and still passed away.
Oh, so this other question just popped into my head. What about what they're talking about if people can reinfect after they've gotten it? Can then they get well again and then go and reinfect others?
Well, it seems like there have been a few cases where they have been cleared and sent home and ended up back in the hospital with even more severe symptoms.
Yikes.
Now, I cannot verify this, but these are reports coming out of India and coming out of Europe.
Okay. Wow.
It is highly possible that it's not being taken completely out of your system and then it's coming back. That does happen with the normal flu strains as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that may not be strictly characteristic of this one type of coronavirus, because there are flus that you'll seem like you're completely over it, and then it hits you like a sledgehammer in the gut.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Taking care of the kids in certain years, you think everybody's over it, then it starts its rounds again.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
The situation here in the United States is we have better hygiene. For now, we have better medical facilities available than they had as far as per person, per capita availability. There are parts of the country that do not have that, and of course, there are people who do not have insurance, so they'll stay home until they're really, really sick. So, we have that to deal with. And then we have the homeless situation. If it gets loose in San Francisco, in the homeless population, that will be completely devastating out there. I think about people like that when I'm doing this research. If it gets loose and it starts passing from place to place, it's going to spread. Now, what we're hoping for is that we get the same kind of mutations we usually get, where it's not as severe and it's easier to survive.
Well, like you said before, the Spanish flu, the second wave was the tougher one.
Oh, yeah, the second wave killed far more number of people than the first wave. And unfortunately for us in the United States, most people don't know their history. They know the Spanish flu killed a lot of people, but I point out to people who are calling me paranoid that the Spanish flu started with one person in the kitchen sneezing. Just one individual sneezed, and millions of people died in every country around the world.
It was a big one, and it's looking eerily like Spanish flu too. Definitely, and probably something that potentially is far worse when we look at the aspect of this potentially being something that was created in a lab to be particularly effective, and this might have different layers to it as it evolves.
That's the other thing. We're only seeing the surface of this thing right now because we're not getting real data. We're having to rely on secondhand. We're not getting, the blast that Dr. Cottrell got, Paul, the information that he got is how we got to the information that led us to believe that this was a CRISPR technology. I've gotten that from other sources as well when they started looking at protein splicing. This could and is a very specifically designed virus, and it has the maximum effect, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about what the world could look like after this. That's a huge question mark.
And
the high population density countries are the ones that are going to suffer this the most. If it goes around a second time and is more lethal like the Spanish flu was, it's not going to look good anywhere.
No, it won't. It won't.
So what are you doing? What precautions are you taking?
Well, a good example is I still have to go to work. So what I do is when I come home, I take my jacket and my outer shirt off, and I spray them with disinfectant, inside and out. I wash my hands with a sanitizer outside. I take my shoes off and I spray them with disinfectant, and they stay outside. Mm-hmm. I go inside after the time has expired for my disinfectant spray, and immediately I go and take a shower. Anything that I get from UPS or from my mail carrier or I bring home from the store, I have been wiping down and disinfecting before it goes into my house, and of course then I have to go through the same process myself again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The idea is, the old people used to leave their shoes out on the foyer or in the mud room or out on the porch. There's a reason why they did that.
Yeah, most definitely. And so I still think it's a good time to take every precaution we can. I mean, we don't have, thankfully, people dying in the streets here like we've seen in China, but we don't know what it's going to look like in a month. That's.
Well, you asked me earlier how far behind the United States was. Honestly, that depends on when the first patient X for the United States, arrived here. And we do not know this.
Well, Seattle guy was 10 days ago, 14 days ago already. The first one that we knew about. So, And the same thing with this whole thing developing. Did it start like around the 1st of December? Or was it at the end of November?
We know the earliest reports in China was the doctor who just passed away. I feel so bad for him. He should be a world-recognized hero for taking the risk he did in going up against the Chinese government and trying to get the information out in November. And unfortunately, he has died, 34 years old.
No.
Yeah, we saw that. It was sad.
But now here we go. We're going back to November, and there was still a lot of international travel, a lot of international business been going in and out, a lot of parts and shipping that were traveling just days from there to here and everywhere else in the world. It is very possible that we were not very far behind having it jump over here. I would say, just hazarding the guess on their rate of contamination, doubling every 6 days, we could have had it here as early as mid-December.
Well,
I'm talking about spreading. I'm not talking about patient X.
Right. Well,
and that actually fits with the numbers that the CDC was putting out until they revised them, because it showed a huge jump in infections, hospitalizations, and deaths at the end of December.
So we're thinking that a lot of the flu deaths this season are actually this, is what we're saying then.
Well, and if the doctors didn't know to check for this particular virus, which they wouldn't have, and they wouldn't have the testing equipment anyway, there's no way for them to say that this wasn't just a flu death with complications of pneumonia.
Okay. I know you don't have your computer up at the moment, but I'm just showing like Flight Tracker, which shows that there's still a lot of flights going on over China and to China worldwide. Not that many compared to, like, if we look at the flights out of Japan, there's still a ton. And remember, Japan's catching up with, well, they're not catching up to China yet, but their cases are growing pretty quickly, as well as some other areas.
Japan's had human-to-human transmission too. You know what gets me is we had human-to-human transmission outside of the deaths 3 weeks ago, and the WHO, back in the days, and giving away my age, anytime that you had something like this, it was an immediate quarantine. There would be no flights going in and out except for bringing back, your expats, and they would be quarantined for 30 days minimum. And then there would be all kinds of protocols taken. None of the common sense things that were established in the 70s due to the first H1N1 outbreak were followed in this thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at countless flights over the U.S. right now. I'm wondering, looking at all these thousands of planes, which one has somebody on it?
Yeah.
That's going to transfer.
There's another mistake a lot of people pointed out. You've got one person on the flight, so you go down and you track down the contact people that were within 5 or 6 seats of them. Well, I've flown. I don't stay in my seat. I go to the bathroom. I move around a little bit. Quarantining 8 people because one person was tested positive makes no sense whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And then they got these poor folks on this ship.
Well, yeah, I feel so bad for them. And here's the other thing people aren't thinking about. In aircraft, you have air recirculation. Mm-hmm. So if I sneeze in the back of the airplane, the guy in the front got it too. Right.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest spreader of them all, is just being in those airplanes. And, we have a friend of ours, well, many, many people, but we have a family member. He's coming in on a plane, and I've just really been putting a lot of white light around him because he's going to be on one of those tubes with a bunch of germs in it.
Well, you all know how I feel, but I'll tell you this. Anybody who prays in any way or meditates in any way, now's a good time to send that positive energy out to the world, because the whole world's going to need it.
I think that's a great idea, to put white light around this thing and, do something like this.
We've got fearmongers all over YouTube and all over the internet, and we've got all these false reports coming out, and, like the thing being stolen from Canada, and what people need to do is remember that fear feeds people that we don't want to be feeding. And the other thing, too, is fear actually lowers your immune response. You know, there's no reason to be fearful or anxious. If you've already been exposed, you've been exposed. You take the steps that you need to keep yourself healthy and keep your immune system boosted, and you fight your way through it with a positive attitude. If you haven't been exposed, you might be, but if you start out fearful and anxious, the odds of you getting through this in any form of easy fashion drops immediately with your attitude.
Yeah, and you know, we'll have other things to talk about in the future, because really when I had you on before for the first time, I wanted to talk about other things, but you know, this is the big subject right now. So, and I know you have been doing a ton of research on it.
Well, you know, and a lot of people think about this as being a way to overthrow the Chinese communists. I'm not against that being an idea, but I have no proof of it. Although this is a very, very potent way to stir up a lot of anger and a lot of resistance to the government over there. I would pray that nobody, well, we know we have psychopaths in charge, but I would pray that nobody was this sadistic.
Right.
Well, it's definitely not a very humane thing to do, to put it that way.
Well, you know, if it comes out 20 years from now that somebody was responsible for this directly as a political move, then I don't care if they're 85 or 95, they ought to be taken out and charged at The Hague for crimes against humanity. I mean, I'm just saying that out loud.
They should. And then someone just reminded me of a question in the chat is he says, can high temperature kill this virus? But I was also wondering if far infrared can kill this virus.
So far, I haven't seen anything being done with UVC or infrared. We know that SARS died out when it got warm, but we think that is more because it just killed the people that had it.
Yep.
And couldn't contaminate anybody else. This thing here, we're not familiar enough with it yet to say that heat is going to kill it. We know that it can survive in cold and go dormant and be reactivated when it warms up. Most flus do this.
Oh, goody.
Well, that's the reason why I said, like, if you get a milk carton that's cardboard, or if you get an orange juice carton at the store,
yeah,
you wipe it down with the Clorox wipe.
Got it.
You know, before you take it inside. That way you don't have to worry about it, because on cardboard with that moisture, this stuff could actually breed.
Oh, yummy.
Well, you know, I'm trying to give information that people need instead of trying to scare them. You know, here's the thing. Instead of being fearful, take the steps that you know to take. Use good hygiene. Use positive attitude. Get your immune system boosted up so that you've got some resistance. And take care of yourself. You know, fast food and sugar are the last two things that you want to be doing right now.
Most definitely. I mean, we talk about that all the time, and as well as, you know, having a spiritual practice is so important right now. Grounding, getting away. That's why, you know, last 2 days I just haven't felt like I could make a video right off the bat, because it just feels like it's such a toxic environment out there that...
Oh, you know, we know so many people are dying, and we know it's a lot more than what they're saying, and that makes the people who actually care get a really, really heavy heart. You know, for me, I think about what's going on in China with people being locked into their homes because they're sick, not getting care, and then, you know, the brutality that we've seen in some of the videos because they're sick. You know, it's heartbreaking, even for somebody like me. Because I could easily see that happening in larger cities if we get this thing going somewhere.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Raven, and we'll definitely have you on again, you know, perhaps on a regular basis as well, because there's a lot more to talk about.
Absolutely. You know, it's a shame that we have to spend so much time on this, but, you know, back to the fear factor. Folks, you have to keep a positive attitude. Get off the refined sugars and the processed stuff as much as you can. I know not everybody has a lot of money, But stay away from that fast food. It's cheaper to go out and buy yourself some broccoli and some beans and make yourself a soup that lasts 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, exactly, and get more nutrition out of it. And
Absolutely.
You don't have a YouTube channel, do you?
I do have a YouTube channel, but I do not put up videos of my own. I haven't done that in years. But I do have quite a few really, really good playlists. Like I said, I've got Dr. John Campbell on my Raven. It's Raven Kiefer, Raven. Last name is Keefer, and you can see this straggly old raven for my mugshot. I've got Dr. John Campbell on there. I've got Dr. Paul Cottrell. And something about Paul that people need to understand: he is being trained in biology. He does numbers and statistics. This man has a brilliant mind. So don't let people telling you that he's not an MD affect your opinion of him, because I know MDs that don't know real medicine, for that matter. But on my playlist, I've got Dr. John Campbell up there. I've got Dr. Paul Cottrell. I've got Peak Project or Peak Prosperity. He's doing really, really good information on this. Just have a look. And I'm not selling anything. I'm not making any money. There's no advertisements on my stuff. I'm just sharing videos that are relevant. And the playlist on that is Coronavirus 2020.
And you have written books. I'm not sure how many.
Years ago, I guess we can tell people that I do have my master's and my doctorate. But years ago, I've written a lot of books. I got 23 in print. It's a lot of that stuff it would be relevant for somebody who's just trying to find their way out of the religion and political traps and the entertainment traps. But it's really funny when you write books within about a year of the information that you've got current coming out. It's not useful for people who are already waking up. So a lot of those books that I've written, they're good works, but they're outdated. I started out with Indie Media Group back before George Bush II, President Bush, was elected, and we were trying to reveal things that were coming down with the banking cabal and the vaccines and the CDC and all these other organizations. And we got raided without warrants. We got our computers unlawfully seized and all kinds of things. They shut us down, and we're talking. I was at this 25 years ago.
Right. Yeah, pre 9/11. So, but a lot of us knew 9/11 was coming. And
Oh yeah. I said that in one of my books that I read. I said, the only way that they're going to maintain control is if they can scare people enough that they can get a never-ending war going. And I actually wrote that in a book that I put out in 1999.
Yep, 2 years before.
Well, you can see it coming. It's not. The plan never changes, and the way that they process and go through this, their modus operandi is always the same. It's just that they change it up just a little bit enough to get people fearful and anxious, and then they push their thing through. Something else to bring up, well, we still got a few minutes. This conjunction that's coming up with Pluto and Mars and et cetera, not only is that part of Nostradamus, it says Mars will reveal him to the fire, but every time this alignment comes out, that's when you start seeing consolidation of power. You can go back to 1284, for example. There's a lot of things historically that you'll see there. But what this is, and I know Cindy's going to be shaking her head, when these alignments happen, things can either change for the better, and that means more freedom, more benefit to humanity, or these cabals start consolidating power, and they become more totalitarian and more tyrannical. And, that's kind of a changing point that we're at right now with these alignments and all the energy that's floating around.
Yeah, I see the energy as a whole lot of potential energy, and I really wish they would teach more astrology in school, because if we knew more about it, we could use these planetary energies as potentials, as momentum to boost your life in certain directions. But as it stands, they like to keep this information out of public hands. And to me, I do Vedic astrology as opposed to Western, because I don't think that the Western astrology, I just don't trust it. I just don't.
Well, it's kind of generic. I can tell anybody that's in chat right now that tomorrow you're going to have an interesting day. some great things will happen, maybe a couple of bad things, but if you get through it, you'll be fine. Now, that's not horoscope. That's BS-oscope.
Yep. Yep.
But here's the thing. Even if you don't believe in Vedic astrology, or you don't believe in astrology, and you don't believe about the planetary alignments, it doesn't matter what we believe. The people that are doing these things and have been doing them for centuries believe in it, and they count their calendars by it.
Oh, they do.
They're planning that far ahead, centuries even.
They do.
So when you start looking at this stuff, it doesn't matter how you believe. You need to understand what your enemy's doing.
Right. That's another reason why I can't get away from it. The Vedic is very detailed as far as making predictions is concerned, but you have to be really, really good at it. And, humbly speaking, I can sort of kind of read a chart. I can get by.
Well, if somebody who's really, really deep and hard to follow sometimes is Mr. Astrotheology.
Yes.
It's Santos Bonucci. I met him years ago. He's an amazing, amazing man. And the information that he has, just on languages alone, is something that everybody should take some time and see if they can get their heads wrapped around, because language is a trap. They call it spelling for a reason, S-P-E-L-L.
Yeah, right.
Another one that's very, very good at explaining words and origins. His name just skipped my mind. I've got a playlist with him on my channel too. But anytime that you can see the origins of words and the origins of ideas, it's like everything is a maritime association. That's what contracts are, birth certificates are, et cetera, et cetera. I know we'll talk. Michael will have me talking about this later. But everything is maritime. So when you look at language, you got to look at it as maritime law. But anyway, so that's what we're getting into, and that's the reason why these people are so careful. They're telling you that we're having a severe flu season. They're not lying, but they're not telling you the truth either.
Right,
and
exactly.
That's how they work.
Oh, that's some good stuff. So, Raven, we're going to save some of that for next time, because
Absolutely.
We got a lot to talk about.
No fear, folks. Be prepared. Take care of your hygiene, and make sure that you're taking care of your family. I would say prep, and that's something else, Michael, that I didn't get into, but I'm going to say it really, really quick if you'll let me.
Sure.
If they go to a quarantine, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but here's the deal. This thing is a 21-day waiting period, plus 7 days to make sure it's cleared. Standard protocol used to be that you go through 3 cycles, and then you double that. Remember what Trump said last year about be prepared for 6 months, folks. I'm not trying to scare you, but I am trying to let you know that you need to at least start preparing.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And that's actually, what I've been telling people. I think we should take that in mind and prepare for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
I'm going by old quarantine protocols. If this thing is 21 days plus 7 to clear, then they will go through 3 cycles to make sure it's out. Then they double that to make sure that it doesn't reinfect. That's what happened in the Spanish flu. It was 6 months, or actually 4.5 months, and then it started again.
Yep. Yeah, so summer and fall, we're going to have to keep our eyes open and stay prepped for sure.
Well, I don't see that they can cover this up much longer as far as what's going on in the United States. We've had a case in Florida that was talking to Paul Cottrell. We've had a case here where I'm at locally. We've actually had several cases here locally that had such extreme onset with no symptoms up to that point. And the doctors had no idea what was going on. The kidney failure, the fibrosis in the lungs. That's not the right word, but it's not going to be much longer. They're not going to be able to keep it held down. And we've actually got our own health people now saying that it's here in the United States and to prepare. There was an article that came out with that yesterday.
Yeah. So 3 cases in Western North Carolina. Are we talking specifically around Asheville or?
Yes.
Wow.
And one of them was right here on top of me in the mountains, if you can believe it.
But that's surprising.
They had traveled to France over Christmas holiday.
Not good.
Not good. Folks, in the chat room, I hope to see you in the chat room some more, and I hope that you'll be able to hear me talk on the phone with Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, Michael.
Oh, and my pleasure, brother. Much love.
Nice to talk to you too, Cindy.
It was great talking to you, Raven. So super great. Thank you.
Y'all have a good night, and everybody out there, have a good night.
Namaste, Raven.
Namaste.
Okay, so that's he doesn't like to be called Dr. Raven Kiefer, but technically he is.
He's a very humble, very, very good man. Very well read, written, extremely great source.
Really what I wanted to have him on talk about was the Illuminati and the Cabal and the powers that be, because he's written over 20 books on that. And the other thing that he's obviously following this, and he's in tight with a lot of other people that are involved in this. So a really, really good source. He's a good guy, real good guy. I met him when I was in Western North Carolina as well. And he's got amazing information. He's done so much studying like I have. We're both like lifelong students ever since we're kids. But he's got one other advantage, is that he has his heritage hand them down stuff as well. And that's how I've learned a lot about what the Cherokee know about the powers that be that are influencing our plane of existence. So pretty interesting stuff. And definitely want to have him on to talk about some other things, especially when we delve deep into who really runs this world and all that. That's really fascinating stuff.
It is so fascinating. So hopefully we can get him back on to talk about that. But this was just a blessing and a wealth of information, questions I've had kind of going around in my head that he was able to answer clearly. And if he wasn't sure, he said he wasn't sure. So that was wonderful.
And so he did connect me with Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we've played phone tag, and he's just going crazy right now with burning the candle at both ends, as so many people recognize what's going on. So there's just a couple other things that I wanted to show you. This was Hal Turner's radio show, and this is obviously in Chinese, but ominous, most ominous. And so what this is saying is the local village has 16 confirmed cases of coronavirus. Of those, 7 had died. So that's like 43.75% kill rate there. Very scary stuff going on. The numbers, we don't know, and that's the bottom line. If you caught Raven talking, he was saying that roughly probably 100 million is really the reality of this. As we see here, Zero Hedge, the coronavirus triggers biggest shock to oil markets since the Lehman crisis. This is so huge. And here's a video too off of Zero Hedge that shows a whole bunch of people running people down. I mean, they're doing this en masse. Now, if we really only had 638 deaths from the flu, quote unquote, do you think they would be running the crematoriums that much? Do you think they would be boarding people in buildings? Obviously, something doesn't add up there. Not at all.
Nope. And the more I'm watching this, the more I'm believing those stories that I'm seeing that are coming out of China, where they do show the people in the hazmat suits. Before, I was really on the fence with that. And, that fence sitting is a little bit less. I'm leaning more toward, it's legitimate, and we do have something to be concerned about.
So, my friends, as always, thank you guys for your support, and like, share, subscribe, keep checking in. We'll keep updating you. I see a third cruise ship in quarantine. Wow. It's really it's a tough time that we are in, but we all kind of, I think, at least those of us that are awake, know the times that we're in. We know consciousness is changing. We know the system is crumbling. We know desperate powers that be do desperate things. And so, we need to pull together and just support each other in every way we possibly can. Take precautions. Stock up, as always. God bless, my friends. Stay safe. Namaste.
Namaste.